All right, good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, in today's video this afternoon, we are going to be talking about how desperate the government is to save monetary policy. That's essentially why we are seeing all the chaos that we are experiencing right now. And in my belief, in everything that I have studied from the monetary policy and the Federal Reserve, this is their desperate attempt to try and save monetary policy. Now, I brought this up to my wife, and Freddie was actually there too. And he says, "What do you mean, like, save monetary policy? Is it going to go away?" And I thought to myself, well, no, it won't go away. Monetary policy is the ability to adjust interest rates. So as I thought about this for a minute, I thought, well, it's not to save monetary policy, it's to save the ability to use monetary policy. Does that make more sense? The ability to then drop interest rates to try and stimulate the economy, or to raise interest rates to try and slow the economy down. That would essentially be monetary policy. But monetary policy had come to an end. And I don't know how many people realize it. When they were going through the great financial crisis and the Federal Reserve took interest rates to the lower bound of zero, monetary policy adjustments were no longer functioning for the economy and for the ability to stimulate the economy. Now, this is a huge concern for not only the Federal Reserve, but also for the government within itself. So now I have to push back for just a second and say, if you knew somebody out there was heading into desperate times, do you know the person well enough to trust them? Or do you think that they might go into some desperate measures? Like, I know a lot of people that I feel are very trustworthy, but I also seen people hit their worst when they got very desperate, especially if it starts coming to the idea of losing the things within your life. When it starts getting to this kind of stage in a lot of people, they start getting very fearful, worried, and then start taking some desperate measures in order to save their existence and what that they have going on. And I think to myself, well, the government and the monetary policy and the Federal Reserve are no different. If they come to a situation in which that they are desperate to try and figure out a way to save this monetary policy, the ability to adjust interest rates to actually stimulate the economy or use them in a way that actually functions in the fashion that they had established from the years prior. Most people will look at this and think to themselves, how desperate could they possibly be? And I think to myself, man, they are going into war. They're killing people off. People are losing their livelihood. They're losing their ability to have anything as far as a dream in their life. It's all going, right? They're desperate. They're taking all that from these people, and those people can feel the pain. They recognize it. They say it every single day. You just go and just pull up the social medias and just look at the people talking about all the pain and suffering that they are experiencing, complaining about how it is that they don't have the ability to buy a house, and how it is that the jobs don't pay enough, and how it is that everything is chaotic in their existence, and how it was for the generations ahead of them. And I think to myself again, I'm like, man, who is it that you plan on expecting to fix this situation? Because the government is desperate right now. They are super desperate in order to position themselves to save that monetary policy. So now, if you have monetary policy that is sitting at the lower bound of zero interest rate policy, you run that for years and it fails to stimulate the economy, what tool do you have that you can use to then stimulate the economy with if unemployment was to rise? There is none. There's none there. When people said, man, what is the Fed going to do when unemployment rises? And I'm thinking, that's not going to happen. They're going to do everything in their power to condition the economy to then have unemployment not rise significantly. And it won't really matter because that doesn't stimulate the economy. The stimulation to the economy is happening at the top 10, 20% of households. If they were to try and save monetary policy, what they have to do is they have to raise interest rates. How many people were talking about the Great Reset? Remember that? Remember the Great Reset? Everybody talked about it. Now just nobody seems to want to talk about it, but yet here it is. We're going through the Great Reset right now. Nobody wants to recognize it. All right. All these homeowners out there who are sitting in a position in this housing market unlike anything else that anybody else is experiencing. Low interest rates, high value in their home. You set them aside. Everybody else, high interest rates, high priced, out of the market, can't do it. Well, so now you have a housing market that's running just awesome for a handful of people, right? All the homeowners out there who have mass equity and low interest rates, they're loving it. They love this housing market. Then you got everybody who wants to be in a house and they're complaining about it, saying, man, this is too difficult. How do we do this? The government needs to do something about this. And how many times have you heard it? The Fed lowers interest rates, house prices go up. They raise interest rates, house prices go down. That doesn't seem to be the case. They lowered interest rates, house prices went up. They raised interest rates, house prices went up. Do you think they have any ability to then create an environment in which that everybody is going to have this awesome time going into it? Probably not. They're desperate themselves. They're trying to figure out a way to create an economy that then doesn't have unemployment rise significantly, while at the same time keeping the consumer going. How do you do this? How do you create an economy in which that the average everyday person is going to earn enough money to then have that American dream when the separation between the rich and the poor has grown so dramatic that the ability for an average job to acquire a home has just gone away? It's just not even possible. And so I think to myself, well, the government is most likely going to inject more new money into the system. And if they do that, you can expect more of what it is that we have experienced. So the people out there saying, man, the government should do something to try and create an economy or an environment in which that these house prices come down, don't wish for it. Because I guarantee you, you won't have the ability to get into that house. But those who do have some money left, the rich elite, they're going to be buying up all them houses. See, the government right now is sitting in a situation in which that they desperately need inflation. They need it bad. A lot of people look at it so that they can have debt destruction on their debt and stuff like that. And although that's, very true, and I mean, there's a lot to look into as far as that goes, but that's not what's happening here as far as saving monetary policy. See, monetary policy stuck at the lower bound of zero is a failure, a complete failure. I don't know how many people recognized it, but for 10 years, or even better, the Federal Reserve was failing, significantly failing. And nobody quite understood it or saw what was happening. And now here it is. We have this massive separation between the rich and the poor, and they're desperately trying to figure out a way to keep the consumer going without driving even more of a wedge and inequality. This is desperate at its highest level. I don't know how many people can recognize it or see it, but to me, it's pretty obvious. I was thinking about this back when I was reading the monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world and saw where John Williams was saying the problem we need to solve these days is a risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. And I thought, damn, what are you going to do about that? You had 10 years of low interest rate environment, quantitative easing, and massive balance sheet adjustments, expansion. And it failed to produce an inflationary scenario. And now here it is, desperate to try and create an inflationary scenario. And you look out there and you think, yeah, it looks pretty desperate. I mean, think about all the craziness that the Trump administration has thrown around since the year he's taken office, and you think about how it is that they are desperate to try and raise the inflation expectation to save monetary policy, the stuff really starts to make a lot more sense. I mean, I think about it every single day and how it is that most people missed what it was that the Federal Reserve was doing just back in 2019. Time goes by and they miss it. They don't go back and they don't read the history. They don't remember it. And then nobody really talks about it. And then you got somebody like the uneducated economist who's coming out here and he is relentless with it, talking the same things over and over again. And it sounds very confusing and almost misunderstood in a lot of ways. And then when you start breaking down these speeches and you start looking into the depths of it, you start realizing, holy crap, man, this dude was really right. So now when we start thinking about some of these things that the Federal Reserve was looking for just a few years ago, you can really start to see it playing out now today. You don't have to question what it is that, they're doing today. You can see it. You can see like, wow, man, they said it a long time ago. They were desperate for it. We need inflation to save our monetary policy. And if we do not get this, we are going to fail. And now here it is. This is what it looks like. And people seem to think that they failed or made a mistake. And I'm like, nah, this is their success. This is them succeeding, right? Their desperate attempt to try and save their monetary policy. This is what it looks like. It looks like they are succeeding at that. I love this speech from Jerome Powell. It was given August 27th of 2020. It says this: the decline in the assessment of the neutral Fed funds rate has a profound implication for monetary policy, with interest rates generally running closer to their effective lower bound. Even in good times, the Fed has less scope to support the economy. Now, they're not going to come right out and tell you, dude, we failed. That's what that sentence is saying. We failed. We have less scope to support the economy. We can't do this at the lower bound of zero. Neutral interest rate is close to zero. Fed funds rate is close to zero. And if we run into an economic crisis or any kind of downturn, we have less scope, which is essentially meaning we do not have the ammo. That's exactly what he was saying. This is 6 years ago that he wrote this down, or gave this speech. Right? The result can be worse economic outcomes in terms of both of employment and price stability, with the cost of such outcomes likely falling hardest on those who are least able to bear them. So now if we don't do something, this is what he's saying, if we don't do something, we are going to have a major problem because we don't have any ammunition to deal with the crisis, and it's going to fall on the people who have, on the least able to bear them. Right? So he says, we got to do something. We got to get off this lower bound to zero, because if we hit a crisis, you're screwed. All the people who are down there at the bottom, they're going to get hammered. It's going to be real ugly. Just a few paragraphs later in the speech, he says this: many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. After all, low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy, and we are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. So all the people out there thinking about what it is facing right now, do you realize Jerome Powell 6 years ago warned you about it? I don't know how many, I've read this thing 400 times on this channel. The people who follow me regularly heard this a million times. This is not new to them. But many people may find this to be the first time they've ever heard something like this. This is what Jerome Powell was saying 6 years ago. He said that essentially a well-functioning economy is certainly mindful, and higher prices are essential for items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. He said this is going to happen. Right? And now people might say, well, why does it have to happen? Does it really have to happen? However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose serious risks to the economy. So Jerome Powell, 6 years ago, when you said this stuff, right? And you said that the many families who are going to be burdened at the lower bound of zero interest rates, if you run into a downturn, are going to have to feel some pain and suffering in order to save your ability to keep that from happening. Am I right? Like, let me say it again. The Jerome Powell, like everybody loves to blame Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell decided that he was going to keep interest rates at the lower bound of zero, and that would support the economy. But if you had a downturn, it would fail. Does that make more sense? Because see, everybody thinks that the Federal Reserve should have interest rates at zero to support the economy. Jerome Powell said in his speech that if they have interest rates at the lower bound of zero and they run into a downturn, the people at the end of the line are going to suffer the most. They have to get off the lower bound of zero. Let me read it again, right? Interest rates generally running closer to their effective lower bound, even in good times, the Fed has less scope to support the economy during economic downturns by simply cutting the Fed funds rate. Okay. This result can be worse economic outcomes in terms of both employment and price stability, with the cost of such outcomes falling hardest on the people who are falling hardest on the least able to bear them. So now here the Federal Reserve is warning that if they stay at the lower bound of zero, we run into a recession, the people at the end of the line are going to be screwed. And then later he says, right, that they are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose serious risks to the economy. Inflation that runs below its desired level can lead to a welcome fall in long-term inflation expectations, which in turn can pull actual inflation even lower, resulting in an adverse cycle of ever lower inflation and inflation expectations. Does it sound like they were concerned about the inflation being too high, or are they desperate to try and keep it from being too low? This is a desperate act. They know it was going to be painful for the people who are least able to afford it. Burdens faced by families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. They knew you were going to do this, right? They knew that you were going to face this problem. And to think that they didn't warn us 6 years ago about this, it would be very naive. So the people who are saying, man, we can't make it, we're struggling, it's so hard, $1 gasoline, and on and on and on and on, and I'm thinking, did you take desperate measures to position yourself accordingly for the fact that they knew they were going to be inflicting inflation upon the people in a desperate fashion? How many people recognize that? All right, raise your hand, hit the like button if you recognize that. How many people have been following the credible threat theory and thought to themselves, damn, again and again and again, it comes out to play that the idea of raising the neutral interest rate on the elevated inflation expectation has been playing out. Here, just go and look at it. Let me bring it up here again. All right? This is how desperate they are. They won't even tell you how desperate they are. Look at this. Type in here, go into your Google search. Let's see if we can find some articles on it. Let's do Federal Reserve, Fed, neutral rate of interest. Neutral rate. All right, let's go ahead and hit the button and go to our news feed, and there's literally nothing. Article, Shifting to Neutral, the Fed's Path to the Neutral Rate, Silicon Valley Bank, January 26th of 2026. Not a single article. Let's see here. Wall Street Journal, Fed officials signal rate cuts may be over. We're talking about being positioned a little closer to the neutral rate. Okay, so one article from January 26th of 2026 and another one in the Wall Street Journal last week. I'm not sure what that one is because I'm not subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. And then here's another one. Oh, here's a good one. Okay. This one was yesterday. Jeremy Siegel on Fed put rate cuts on hold and will be neutral for a while at best. Oh, let's hear what he has to say. Maybe there's some good information in here. Maybe they are starting to let it out. But let's see how confused it really makes the people. Hold on, we got to get through the ad. All these people in their ads. See, this is one of the things that I find very interesting out there is as people start to talk about what it is that the Federal Reserve needs to do with the interest rate adjustments, very, very, very rarely do you ever hear them talk about where the neutral interest rate is. Because the neutral interest rate is the rate that is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And when that rate is neutral and the Fed is elevated, it's a hell of a lot less restricted than people would ever have given a consideration
Professor
for.
at the Wharton School, he's Jeremy Siegel, also Wisdom Tree's
Let's see what he has to say
Economist.
here.
Welcome back. It's nice to have you.
Good to see you, Scott.
This is everything, obviously, right?
Yeah, I mean, the war is it. And that news about the Pakistani deal came out about 20 minutes ago. We had a 250-point rally on the Dow. I see four scenarios.
See,
I'll give them to you.
I love it, right? Because, you know, one of the other things that we have learned of specific words and sentences are quickly incorporated into asset prices. I just love how he just basically just said it right there.
Best to worst. The best, of course, is in the next 3.5 hours, Trump tweets, we got a deal. You got a 1,000-point rally, and by the way, if it's a good deal, you're going to get all-time highs in this month.
See, it doesn't have to have a deal, just tweet it. Just tweet. You don't actually have to do anything. Just tweet it. He just said it. Right? See, this is like, I mean, it's coming to the point, like, I don't know, I mean, they got the taco trade and stuff like that. I don't know if they've actually come up with a name for what it is that they're describing right here, but he literally just said it, right? If all it takes is a tweet saying something, and man, we'll have a 1,000-point rally.
Through spring and summer. Second scenario is just what we've heard. Comes 8 o'clock, we got good negotiations, promisingly enough that I'm going to delay. Then you get what's called the relief rally. And in fact, we could have just had a little bit of that now, a couple 100 points, and, hope springs eternal if that negotiations are going well.
See, this is like, to me, right there, that stuff is so propagandized information, like hoping the negotiations go. Listen, I'm assuming, because I don't know, because I'm not in the military and I'm not a high-ranking military official, but I'm pretty sure that at this point, the United States has pretty much disassembled the Iranian military, right? I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure they probably dismantled pretty much the entire thing, right? Or at least the significant portions of it. And now, all is fair in love and war, okay? All is fair. It doesn't like all this like, oh, hey, let's sign up for this peace treaty kind of idea. Let's do this peace thing. And then you go and you blow them up some more. And it was just like, hey, I thought we were doing a ceasefire. I was like, yeah, I know, right? But, all is fair in love and war.
Fourth, the bombing starts, and you're going to see a big drop, I think, on that bombing if it does start at 8. But the response of Iran is going to be very important about where the market goes.
See, this is what I love about it. It's just like, this is obviously a little bit older of a video talking about it, but this is what I really love about this, is that they literally play into that propagandized information. Like, this is all they're talking about. To me, like, I push back against it, and I just like, I immediately, as soon as he said that on Sunday that this was going to happen, I'm like, no way. All right. It ain't going to go down like that. You're going to find him backing out from that. And like, even here, he's trying to recognize that it would happen, but then says, okay, well, what if it does happen? And it's like, no, that's not going to be the case, right? He's going to back off, and then the Dow's going to rally, and everybody's going to be like, talking about the next, credible threat.
Weak military response, that anti-ballistic missiles are able to take down most of them, and it is not very, effective at hitting its targets. I think the market's going to creep back pretty strongly, because that really shows that the U.S. Has the upper hand. If, and this is the worst scenario, if they have rockets that does damage significantly the oil infrastructure of the UAE and other Arab countries, all right, then we got a lot more.
See, this is like, all this stuff to me is like useless information. I find it entertaining to listen to, and I find it kind of intriguing in the way that some people interpret the information and stuff. But the important stuff is that neutral interest rate. We're almost halfway through this video, this interview, and he still hasn't gotten to the neutral interest rate yet. To me, that should be the number one thing that we should be talking about before anything else, because if you talk about neutral interest rate, you'll understand whether or not the bombs will raise or lower that neutral interest rate, because that's the most important part to look at, all right?
Downside into the market. So
yeah, I don't think anybody.
It could be anywhere. It could be anywhere in between, and all those scenarios, probably going to be playing out in the next few hours.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would disagree with your sort of worst case scenarios should they come to pass. The hope, of course, is that they won't. Are you trying to allow yourself more and more to hang on to the idea? One may be a stretch, right? A firm deal, and then we race to these new highs immediately. But at least to point number 2, a deal to delay or do whatever to avoid the worst case scenarios that you laid forward, and that in and of itself is going to be good enough for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, you could call it taco. It's not really a chicken. If there really is,
that's right. He doesn't want to admit it, but that's exactly what's going down here.
Progress. I mean, it did seem that there was some slight alteration of Iran's original demands, and Pakistan saying open that to being a neutral position in between, saying to Iran, that was hopeful. I mean, it was 250 points hopeful for the market. So, if that seems to be moving the chess pieces.
It's funny is that they're trying to recognize, like, these guys should really take my course. If they took my course, they would be like, man, let's talk about this in a whole different way. The conversation would not sound anything like this. He sounds confused and like, I don't know, maybe, in this. If he had the credible threat theory, at the lens of the credible threat theory, whether or not he thought it was accurate or not, I guarantee you he would be seeing this and saying it a whole lot differently. Right? He wouldn't be like, well, what is this and that and another thing. Like when I heard that on Sunday night, I'm like, oh, this is totally not going to play out. Right? They are not going to be annihilating the entire civilization. This is totally going to end up being a benefit to the stock market in ways that most people are probably never going to actually profit from.
Forward, you're going to get a relief rally, and see what happens. So, I mean, right now, and if I were to ask what is the most likely, it's probably that second scenario to play out. But we have to be prepared for anything. I mean, this is a very important geopolitical moment.
See, like he's basically saying, like he's thinking that it's not going to happen, right? But you have to take it into consideration. It's a real credible threat, right? This is a real credible threat playing out.
Coming up. Now, in any case, even let's talk about in the best case scenario, we do get a deal. Oil is not going to come down all the way back to 60 right away. There was damage. There is going to be still some risk premium in the market. But I think importantly is we're going to have to build up our defense forces. I mean, I think Trump already has a $200 billion request in. It's going to go higher. Fiscal expansion. I don't think we're going to see the 10-year drop below 4. In that case, I don't see the Fed dropping rates. As you know, I was quite forward in advocating that early on. But given these developments, and also given developments where I see bank credit increasing and inflationary pressures increasing, I think we have to put on hold any cuts. I think it's going to be neutral for a while at best.
Bam! All right. He said it at the very end. He said it at the very end. Oh, it's going to be neutral at best. Finally, all this crap that they were talking about, going all the way through it, whether or not the economy is going to go into war and all this other stuff, and it finally gets down to some information that we, the people, could actually use, which is whether or not the economy is going to be restricted or not, whether or not that Fed funds adjustment is going to be stimulating or not, and he comes down to the point where he can actually talk about it, the neutral interest rate. And it was like the last 5 seconds of the interview. How many people are going to internalize what it was that the neutral interest rate has to offer? Nobody. Everybody heard about all the bullshit going on with Iran and all the war and all the bombings and all that other stuff. That guy talked for 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes, and gave you 2.5 seconds of real information. We're very close to the neutral interest rate. Most likely the Federal Reserve isn't going to move because of that. All this stuff was inflationary pressure that raised it. Like Homeboy was right there. Here it is. He had the opportunity to share that information with the entire world so that they could better understand how it is that they can position themselves for it. And all he did was talk about propaganda. Yeah. God. What a frustrating way to try and figure out what the hell is going on in this world is by listening to these damn news articles. It's just so crazy. There it was. Kashkari. Here's one. Let's see. Does he talk about the interest rate negative? Okay. Neutral rate. We've cut interest rates a bunch in the last couple of years, Kashkari said. My guess is we're pretty close to neutral on where our monetary policy is. But ultimately, we need to see where does inflation go. Does it come all the way back down to 2%? What happens to unemployment rate? Does it keep going up, or does it level off, or does it come back down? Okay. So how many people know this? How many people actually realize or know that right now, considering how ugly it is out there for everybody, that we're actually in a very neutral economy? It's neither accommodating nor restricted. Nobody. Nobody knows that. Or else they would be talking about it. All they talk about is possible recession and how high gas prices are and how horrible the wages are, and that's, and how high the house prices are. That's all they talk about. But nobody wants to talk about how this economy right now is sitting in a very neutral position considering the financial portion of it. It's one of the scariest things that most people who actually understand this and see it are probably recognizing right now, is how desperate of an attempt these government agencies are in the way that they are conducting themselves in order to save this monetary policy, knowing how painful it was going to be on the people. They straight up admit it. And now you go and you look out there and you see the evidence of all pain. The people are crying about it every single day. And then I wonder to myself, as I think about it, and I'm like, how come it is that this information was shared? Like, it's not me, just the uneducated economist. This was a speech delivered by the Federal Reserve, who straight up just said it. We know that this is going to be painful on the people who have lost jobs and incomes. It's going to be hardest on those. Now, they said it straight up. Nobody heeded the warning. Now, I did. Right? I tried to do my best to keep my expenses as low as possible and keep my income as high as possible and just kept that moving as much as possible, knowing that we were going to be facing some serious situations coming into the future. Here it is, it's coming, and now you see the desperation not only within the government, but the people themselves. And I think that anybody take it into consideration that they should have learned about what was happening with monetary policy. But instead, what they did is blame the Federal Reserve for creating an inflationary scenario. And to me, that is exactly what they wanted from you. How many people know that? Very few. You think about it. How many people out there pushed the idea that the government was creating an inflation by printing up all this money? They talked about how it was going to drive the prices up of everything, how it was going to destroy the entire world. And then on top of it, the only way to save yourself is to buy their gold. The entire time it was a sales pitch. And that sales pitch, although did sell the gold, it also benefited the Federal Reserve because it raised the inflation and inflation expectations. It pulled that neutral interest rate higher. Here we got Kashkari last month saying, hey, we're in a neutral position. We got to wait and see. This economy is actually not restricted at all, and we may find that the unemployment doesn't rise very significantly. I wonder who said that. We find that these corporations don't need bailed out because they got a secret bailout using the tariffs. How many people are recognizing the desperate measures that this government is really going through right now? Well, everybody wants to look at it and say, oh man, they're doing all this stuff to make themselves rich. And I'm thinking, no, it's a desperate attempt to stay rich. That's what's happening here. Let's go read some comments here and let's see if we can get some questions answered. Those of you who have joined the school community, I want to thank you very much. We are going to be doing a webinar this Saturday. We'll break down as much information as we need to in order for the people to get a better understanding of it. And those webinars are awesome because you can actually have a conversation with me, like we actually talk to each other instead of just reading comments or something like that. The school community is an awesome place to go to. This is the type of conversations that we have regularly. We have 300 members to the school community. And I tell you, it is to me, that is probably going to be the most golden spot to find all the credible threat theory information, because the people who are there are serious about it. They're serious about looking at it and serious about trying to position themselves in accordance to what it is that they're finding from the credible threat theory. And there's really no other place that you're going to have that kind of conversation if you don't join the school community. So that's happening this Saturday. I just want to plug that for you guys. But let's go read some of these comments here. All right. City Star Productions, man, thank you so much for the support. $1.99. Do you believe the Fed has enough ammunition now? No, I don't. And see, the thing is the ammunition will be lost immediately if... Hold on. Yes, they do, so long as the inflation elevation stays elevated, right? Or inflation expectations stay elevated, sorry. The inflation expectations stay elevated, inflation stays elevated, then yes, the Federal Reserve has some ammunition because they can lower their interest rate in that inflationary environment and stimulate the economy with that adjustment of interest rates. That will never happen. Right? That will never, I mean, I shouldn't say it'll never. That is most likely not going to be a case, right? That's not going to happen because the understanding of inflationary pressures being elevated and then lowering interest rates in that environment is like, no, like that's not something that'll happen. That's not something that will even, I don't even know if the economists would be accepting of such situations, right? Because basically that would mean is that the Federal Reserve is trying to push inflation even higher than the elevated inflation that already exists, and the people would lose their gourd, right? They would just absolutely freak out over that. So most likely the Federal Reserve is not going to lower interest rates in an inflationary environment in order to stimulate the economy, although they could. That's not what they're going to do, right? Stimulating the economy is because of recessionary pressures and deflationary pressures. They're trying to find inflation by lowering interest rates and stimulating the economy. They're pushing for inflation. So they're not going to do that. They're not going to lower interest rates in an inflationary environment. People would, like I said, it would just, the confidence that people would have in the Fed would be erased almost immediately. Like there would have no credibility whatsoever after that. So there is no adjustment of interest rates to stimulate the economy. Like that's not a thing anymore. When the inflation disappears, and if inflation was to disappear and the Fed was to lower interest rates, it would not stimulate the economy because of the low proximity of R star to the lower bound. So R star is different from the neutral interest rate. R star is the neutral rate when the economy is operating at its potential alongside low and stable inflation and full employment. I know that's really confusing, but ultimately it's like the Fed's sweet spot. And then if you have an inflationary scenario packed on top of it, the neutral interest rate will rise on account of the inflation. Right? So R star is not something that the Federal Reserve can move or adjust or anything. It's just a spot that exists. And this is a very low interest rate considering the past. R star, that neutral rate, has been falling over the years because of a demographics issue, global growth, and interest rates being, safe, secure interest rates being too low. But it doesn't really matter. Point being is that the low R star environment is the problem for stimulating the economy because when the inflation disappears, that neutral interest rate being very close to zero, when the Fed does bring interest rates back to zero again, they will not be far enough below R star to actually stimulate the economy. There's no stimulating the economy with interest rate adjustments. It does not work anymore. It just does not work anymore. I think I'm the only one who knows this, except for the Federal Reserve. But I just don't get it why more people don't bring this up. But if you remove the inflation expectations from the economy, from the scenario, R star, the neutral rate, is very close to zero, and the Fed cannot get far enough below that R star to actually stimulate the economy. So no interest rate adjustments to stimulate the economy will not work, not going to happen. Okay? However, you can still stimulate the economy by raising the neutral interest rate. Right? So like the Fed typically would lower interest rates to try and stimulate the economy. What they were doing is they were trying to get far enough below neutral to stimulate the economy. Well, as neutral interest rate got closer to the lower bound, they couldn't do it anymore. This is why quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4 and the massive balance sheet adjustments and the forward guidance of the great financial crisis failed to produce the outcome of an inflationary scenario for the Fed. It just doesn't work anymore because of that low neutral interest rate. So again, what is it that the Federal Reserve can do in order to save that monetary policy? Elevated inflation and inflation expectation. Get the hell off the lower bound of zero with that Fed funds rate. Keep that inflation expectation rolling. And now you have the neutral interest rate creeping up to the Fed funds rate in the economy is far less restricted than anybody had ever given a consideration for, but they don't recognize it because ultimately the working class individual is not the focus of the economy anymore because we're not the consumer. It's up at the top 10, 20%. So we feel pain, we feel anxiety, we feel the frustration, we feel all that other stuff, but not realizing at the same time that we're not the focus of the economy. Even though we're 80% of the people, we're very, very insignificant in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the consumer. All right. Thank you so much, Fishy Handle, for being a member of the channel. I really appreciate that. And we will be breaking down another Philip Jefferson speech here real soon. He just recently did one, but it's really long and I wasn't ready to do that tonight. So maybe we'll do it tomorrow or over the weekend or something like that. If we, City Star Productions, thank you again so much for that $4.99, man. I really appreciate all the support here. If you are considering sitting in a neutral position, how do you think the price of oil shooting up or crashing will affect this? Well, I think it's more the neutral position as far as whether or not you are an investor or a debtor within the economy. Like the prices will still move around. Like the prices don't go neutral and stay still. Like prices are going to fluctuate all over the place. But the financial portion of things in the debt, like how much an investor receives, how much does the debt actually cost the debtor? This is where it becomes neutral. And so let me see if I can explain it. I've broken this one down for a few people in the past, and it's a really good one when you think about it, right? And that's to look at it from both sides, as an investor and as a debtor, right? And what happens when the neutral interest rate rises? So now, this is the problem that most investors are going to face going into an inflationary environment, right? Is that they anticipate on getting a 5% return on their investment, but let's say inflation's running 3%. What is it that the investor is going to get after inflation? 2%, right? So here you have an inflationary scenario of 3% on an investment of 5% that is essentially bringing a real interest rate of 2% to the investor. Now, if you lower the inflation and inflation expectation, you will raise that real interest rate. So here, the investor who's getting a 5% return on their investment with a 2% inflation now gets a 3% real interest rate return. Now, goes the other way. If inflation rises to 4%, now the investor gets a 1% return. If inflation rises to 5%, the investor is now neutral. They don't make or lose any money on it. Their 5% in return is essentially eaten by a 5% inflation. So now the same thing happens for the debtor on the opposite side of it. Right? If you have a debt that has a 5% interest rate to it, and you have an inflationary scenario that is rising up to 5%, you can make the debt neutral. Lower the inflation expectation, you will raise that real interest rate on the debtor, and that becomes a burden and painful, restrictive economy. You see how this works? So here you have a whole society of people immersed in debt who's now moving into an inflationary environment that's raising that neutral rate. This is a huge stimulus to all the debtors out there. I don't know if they recognize it because of the painful experience with the high prices and stuff like that. And most likely they're not type of people who are going to get a return on their investments being concerned about that. Most of them are just trying to show up every single day so that they can make their wages and pay their bills. And so none of this stuff is going to make sense to them. And it's certainly not going to be anything that they're going to be like, wow, man, I definitely feel the relief of a neutral interest rate. Like that's not where it's going to happen. Like those people aren't going to recognize it unless they have positioned themselves in a way that has cut back on all their expenses so that they can get a cash flow that comes in. And with that cash flow, they can start getting a return on that investment. Where they place that investment will be very important when it comes to where it is that they plan on getting that return, considering how the economy is going to be less restricted going into the future. I know this is difficult for a lot of people to understand and relate to, but again, think about it simply. Don't try and complicate it. That's the problem. Like most people want to make it too complicated to understand. Don't try and complicate it. Keep it as simple as possible and then let your understanding grow, right? Like you will start to recognize it in the articles you read, you'll recognize it out there in the conversations that you'll have, you'll start to see it more and more, right? Let your understanding of it grow. But just think about it simply, right? If you're an investor with a 5% return, right, a 5% investment, but you have a 3% inflation, the real interest rate goes to 2%. Lower the inflation expectation, start raising the real return on that interest. The debtor, which is by far the bigger portion of this economy, a debt-based, consumer-based economy, The debtor faces the exact opposite of that. If you raise that inflation expectation, you will then lower the real interest rate to the debtor. Right? And this is the desperate attempts of the government right now. This is what they are attempting to do. And it's working. It's totally working. And people don't recognize that it's working because, again, they're thinking about themselves and the working class individual being the backbone of the economy and being the majority of the economy. And that's from a time long ago. That was the case. That was very much a real way of looking at the economy, and everybody out there working and everybody, doing their best and all that. That was very, very real when it came to the way the economy was operating and how it is that the Federal Reserve would function and all that. The backbone of the economy was the working class individual. But that went away after the great financial crisis. Right? And then was unfortunate, but after that, even a good job would suck. The ability to then use your average everyday wage in order to acquire a home became harder and harder and harder and harder, right? Because of the ever increasing amounts of new money that's pouring into the system. People try to use their day job to compete against people who are using leverage to get the house. This is going to be very hard to compete against. Now, is it possible? Absolutely. All kinds of programs, all kinds of people out there who can offer it up. And as far as ideas go, as far as getting you into a house, there's lots of ways, right? The internet's full of these ways of getting people into a house. Right? The issue we have to face is that the ability to get into a house and then continue to operate in a way that can pay for that house is not something that is very easy. If you can get in early enough on low interest rates and a good price and all that other stuff, you might have a better opportunity into it. But as time goes on, the separation between the rich and the poor is going to make home ownership that much more difficult. Even the idea of just trying to maintain a home gets incredibly expensive. So many people are like, man, I just want a house. I just want it. And I'm thinking, are you sure about that? Right? Now, I understand that everybody wants their stability. They want their peace of mind. They want that, piece of the American dream. They have all this stuff that they had believed in, but they're in an economy now that doesn't necessarily operate in a way that gives those people that sort of benefit. If it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, maybe. But we're moving into a two-tiered economy. Asset holders, right? And those who are working day jobs or just working poor, or however you want it. It may not be a day job, you could be owning your own business and still be poor. But ultimately what it's going to be is the asset holders and then everybody else. And this is the unfortunate situation we've now faced with this ever increasing amounts of new money that comes in. The Cantillon effect swings hard. So what do you do about it? Well, you have to think, do I do it with my day job? No, it ain't going to work. And people say, man, I don't want to have to work 2 jobs and a side hustle just so I can own a house. And I'm thinking, well, that sucks for you because that's what I'm doing, right? I'm doing it in one of the most expensive places in the entire nation to do this. I see all these people out there complaining about how hard it is to try and get in, and it's impossible, and a house is $5 million or $500,000, and how is anybody going to do this? And I'm thinking, and you know what I did? Is I didn't buy anything, and I saved every dime I could. I got myself out of debt, and then I put $42,000 down on a house. I put it in such a position that I would not go underwater, right? Now, I wouldn't have done that by choice, but I was in a position in which that they weren't going to allow it for me to do it any other way. So I managed with side hustles and part-time jobs and all the other stuff, cutting back on my expenses, was able to save up $42,000 so I could put it down on a house. And people want to tell me that it's not possible to do it nowadays. And I'm thinking, yeah, you're right. It's not. It's impossible. For you, with your day job, and your expectations that the government's going to do something to come in and change that situation for you. I recognized it a long time ago, government ain't coming. Like, I don't trust government at all. Haven't my entire life. I still don't trust government, not even slightly. Like, there is nothing that they say that I have any belief in. None. All right? And with that, I have very little expectations of them doing anything for me or to do anything that's going to put me in a better position or condition. Like, they don't do that. That's not what they do. And so as I see other people are like, well, you should believe that they would. And I'm like, I'm not going to. And I'm not going to believe in that. And when I don't believe in it, then I start finding my own way. And it was hard. And it wasn't easy. And it's still a sacrifice every single day. But I think to myself, if you don't get into property ownership, you can probably consider yourself left behind. I mean, you can do it with you can do it as being a capitalist too. You can buy into stocks and bonds and do that kind of investment. That part is just as good. It's not as good in the sense that property owners really dictate everything. They're in control of all the styles, all the conditions, everything that happens. It comes down to the property owners. But capitalists can live independently of the state like a property owner could. It's possible. And not saying that all property owners get to live independently of the state, but the people who live independently of the state are property owners and capitalists, and that's it. Everybody else has to work for somebody. All right, moving on. Man, I'm really rambling today. This is some good tea. All right, trying to get off the coffee, so I've been drinking tea lately. This stuff has a lot of caffeine in it too, yeah? All right, some of them can. Alrighty, property owners are the state. Yeah, they really are. Nathan, you got my anxiety going. Thanks, man. Deplorable. All right. Let's see here. I bought too much Gucci and Chanel when I shouldn't have. I drank too much. Everybody has their thing, right? Somebody has some luxurious experience or, something else in their life. I drank it all. I think about all the money that I drank. If I had put that towards any kind of investment, do you know how much I would, I wouldn't even be on this channel doing any of this. I would be going living something really awesome in my existence. All the money that from the time that I turned 21, right, when I could legally buy beer, to the day that I quit when I was, I don't know, somewhere in my 40s, I guess, maybe late 39s. I don't even know exactly. I think I was somewhere in my 40s. And when I think about it, I'm like, man, that's where it all went. That's where my awesome existence in this world, my retirement, everything. I cut back on everything so I could go buy beer. I didn't have anything else, but I would drink. I would drink and smoke weed. And with those two things, I think to myself, man, if I had taken that money right there that I had dumped into smoking weed and drinking beer and just put that towards, even just saving it, it would have been a huge amount of money. But if I had put that towards anything that would have had a return, especially during times of the great financial crisis when I was really into it, the drinking part of things, not investing. If I had put all that money that I had dumped into alcohol, into the stock market or into a real estate or into something, outside of what it is that I was drinking or smoking, I would be so much better off today. I can see it just as clearly as the day is today, right? It's just I look back and I was like, that was my major mess up right there. I'm not the smartest guy. I graduated high school, but I kind of cheated my way through it. I don't have any kind of real business. I don't have family inheritance. I don't have anything like that going on in my existence at all. I don't have any of that stuff, but I have a commitment, right? And I'm committed to an outcome. And I believe that the efforts that I put in are helpful and useful. And I think that I'm feeling somewhat rewarded for that. And if I'm still going to be helpful and useful in this world, then I think that I should, at some point in my life, actually acquire some of the positions in which that I am going for. Do I get it? I don't know. But I really love the ride. I really love this journey that I'm on. So if I get it, cool. If I don't care. I'm on my way, right? And that's the point about it, is that I love the journey that I'm on. I love the experience that I'm getting from it. And because of that, I do feel like I'm getting rewarded. I don't have to achieve those things in my life. I'm on my way to getting them, and being on that way to getting them is almost as good, right? Man, I'm so far away from it. I gotta scoot over it a little bit. All right, let's read some of these comments. Simon, I mean, I've been on board with you for years, and now you, up until yesterday, I was on your train. But when the president of our country threatens thermonuclear war, I'm sorry, I have bigger issues. Well, then go and deal with the bigger issues of thermonuclear war, the credible threat of it. I mean, come on, man. Have you ever watched? You ever watched Doctor Strangelove? It's a great movie. It's a great old black and white movie, man, where there's a plane headed to Russia and it's nukes, right? And they're going to go and drop this thing. And they lost communication with the plane. And now everybody, the entire world is desperate, trying to figure out how they can keep this bomb from going off, because when it does, the doomsday machine starts going off and all the bombs start flying all over the world and the entire annihilation starts to take place. It's an awesome movie. So good. God, it's so good. In fact, I'm going to go and watch it again. They're not going to drop nukes. All right? That's not, the moment that you drop them, everybody starts dumping them. It's the point they exist and don't get used is the whole reason why we even have them, is to make sure that they don't get used. I wouldn't trust this president for anything. I wouldn't trust a single word that comes out of this dude's mouth. Not one. That's me. You can believe it. All right? I'm not telling you what to believe. Anybody can go out there and believe whatever they want. I have zero trust for our government, and I have no trust for that dude. Right? None. Yeah, and not to mention that I think everything that is being delivered out there on the mainstream media, including all the tweets, is 100% propagandized information to put the fear and anxiety and doubt into people so that they can be easily controlled. And so, hey, man, I get it. If you don't like the channel anymore because of that attitude that I have towards it, I totally get it, man. I mean, you got to resonate with the people that are like-minded with you. All right. My best friend bought into dispensaries at the right time. I don't know how that is. I wouldn't invest into a dispensary. Again, that was probably the last place I would ever put any money, right? You got to think, man, I'm from Oregon. It has never been illegal here. You know that? It has never been illegal here to smoke, to have it in your possession. It's been a misdemeanor my entire life. As long as you had less than an ounce and you didn't have it packaged for distribution and you weren't producing it or anything like that, simple possession was a $600 fine and you went on your way. Nobody went to jail. Nobody lost their life. None of that stuff happened, right? You literally got a ticket and you went on your way. They confiscated, and as long as, like I said, you weren't driving, distributions or, production or something like that, it was no big deal. Nobody cared. And so when it came time to invest into these things, and I'm thinking, you do realize, everybody, that this is a worthless product, right? It doesn't have any real value to it. Anybody can grow it. And I'm not saying that anybody can just grow good weed. Anybody can go and put a plant out in the backyard and it will grow, and sometimes it actually does pretty well. But the point being is that anybody can do it. And so it's not that hard to make something happen. The ability to do it is in massive abundance. Like, it's just, the ability to make it happen out there is just overwhelming. It's like a sea of green around here. So the chances of that being profitable don't exist unless you put limitations, rules, and governance on it. Because once you start putting rules and governments, you put like laws, make it illegal, well, now you got some value to it. Because if you don't put some sort of illegal or make it illegal or something, then there's no value in it. None. All right? Everything has value if you make it illegal. With risk comes reward. Right? Think about it. Sex, drugs, alcohol, firearms, it doesn't matter. Make anything illegal and you give it a bunch of value. Especially if they want it, I mean, it doesn't matter if they don't want it, but if they want it and you make it illegal, oh gosh, talk about giving it a price tag to the sky, man. It's almost like it's done on purpose. All right. We've been collecting the cow patty mushrooms near you, and you know what I mean, Economist. The cow patty ones? No, man, what you really want to go for are the Azarescents. They don't grow on patties. They grow generally on rotted wood and in grassy areas for the most part. And those are the ones that you really want. The other ones, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, they all probably do their thing, but the Azzies are the best. Yeah. And not that I would know. Huh. All right. What is this, Nathan? Uh-oh. All right, Nathan, if you're flying on a plane and you crash on the desert island and the plane is full of gold, what gold will you do when you all need to feed yourself? Well, that doesn't that's kind of funny. What if you had dollars? What if you had a briefcase full of dollars and you landed on that desert island and you're hungry? What if you had, anything, M16 with you? It doesn't matter. If there is no resources, there's no resources. It's like, what difference does it make? And it's not having like, and this is another thing, like the whole gold. I don't know what you're having a conversation there, Nathan, with, but a lot of people say like, well, what are you going to do with your gold when you're hungry or something? And I'll be like, I don't know. I got other ways of like, dealing with my food issue. I'm not using gold in my mind in exchange for food. That's what other people have in their mind when I tell them that I have gold or silver or something, and they put it in their head. Oh, you're going to trade that for food later on when you're starving or out of whatever. And I'm thinking that's your plan that would fail. Right? That's your idea. That's not mine. And to put that into me and say, how are you going to deal with that? I would be like, that's not the way I'm going to deal with things. Don't tell me how I'm going to deal with it. That's not how I'm going to deal with it. Yeah. All right. The dollar has value because we value everything in dollars. That's kind of true. But it also has value because everybody owes debts in dollars. Let's see here. If it was a misdemeanor, that would mean it was illegal or have been living my life incorrectly. I said it was never a crime. Right? I mean, I did say it was illegal, but what I meant to say, it was never a crime. Right? And even still, on the legal basis of it, like, I really don't know anybody who got in that much trouble. Like, in fact, I don't remember anybody ever getting a ticket, and it was always dumped. It was always just, thrown away or confiscated or whatever. But never, I don't remember. Well, that's not true. I do remember a friend of mine whose parents turned her in. Of all things, 16 years old, they found some weed in her room and they called the damn county on her. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it, man. I'm like, talk about setting this kid up to have to deal with this for their, I mean, we're in Oregon. It was a little bit of weed, but anyway. So she was the only one that I know of who actually got fined. With it, and that was like, I don't even know what the thing. I don't even know. Like, I remember her being in trouble, but I don't remember what the results of it were. I don't even know if she had to pay it or she did community service or whatever for it, or if it was just dropped altogether because it was probably ridiculous to begin with. But ultimately, I like, even the cops didn't care. Like, if it was, as long as it was just like a personal use thing, they didn't care. They just dumped it out and was like, get out of here. And so nobody really got in trouble for it. Yeah. All right. Wayne, Jack Links is like 2 hours north of me, maybe 3 hours. Okay. Deja, what if you were stuck on the raft with 3 people without food? UE knows. Do you have you watched it yet, Deja? Did do you hear some of the lines that from the play that I use here on the channel? Like the artistic fantasies. Ahead of this time, no trouble for weed. They don't even take my weed when I was in P-Town. They thought I was tagging, but I wasn't. Yeah, man, I think we just killed the algorithm for this video. Oh, well. Simon, that's what I'm saying. What's good? That's what I'm saying. What good is economic theory going to do you when millions of people around you would are hungry and desperate, gold is not going to save you. Whoa, what the hell is that? Oh, it's a moth. Okay. Um, well, let's see here. I think you've put yourself, or trying to put me, into a Mad Max kind of scenario, and then say, in that particular, you're screwed. Am I right? I mean, if that's what you're saying, right? Like, if you're in this Mad Max, you got millions of hungry people all around you starving, which is this like kind of Mad Max scenario idea that you're describing, and you're saying in that spot at that time with my gold, I'd be screwed. In that very unique possibility situation. What about all the millions of other possible parallels that could exist? Can you think of like maybe a handful of them in which that gold would actually do quite well? Maybe, just maybe, as opposed to that one particular situation in which that you're saying is going to be like, worthless to have gold. Can you think that there might be some other situations that don't fall into the category in which that you're looking for, in which that gold could possibly carry you to the other side, and then you would be able to invest and then use that gold to establish generational wealth opportunity for your family and you? Like, I mean, these are the sort of the things that I think about. But then again, I don't think I'm going to be going to the other side because I don't think there's another side to get to. Like that complete collapse of everything, and you're looking out there at the Mad Max and you're trying to figure out how it is that you're trying to get to the other side of it. I don't think that exists. Okay? I think what we're going to have is ever increasing amounts of debt issuance. I think we're going to have ever increasing amounts of inequality. We're going to have an entire nation of renters, no real homeowners out there. I think we're going to be seeing tokenizations and stable coins, central bank digital currencies, eventually moving towards cashless society and negative interest rates. That's the stuff that I see. Now, could it be hell on earth at some point, and Mad Max scenario, and millions of people and all that other stuff? Sure, that could happen too. But my studying of economics and my understanding of the situation we now face and how it is that I feel is going to go into the future with my understanding of economics, that ain't going to happen. Not like that, could it? Sure. Anything's possible. There's a billion million parallels out there. But I don't think that's one of them that we're on. Maybe some people are on it, but not me. Buy guns and ammo. It's certainly not a bad idea to have that. Right? And that's something that, a lot of people don't consider is just like, what is it that I need to do to protect myself? You ever thought that maybe, getting even like a lot of people think, man, I need to go and get something really badass, and get some really like high speed assault rifle or something like that. And to me, it's just like, that's not really the direction that I would go. Right? I would think more utility. I would think something that's going to be useful and helpful in survival or even some small defense or fighting applications to it. But really, it's going to be more about survival. And to me, there ain't no better rifle that I would want to take out there for survival than a 1022. Right? I mean, it's lightweight. You can pack thousands of rounds with you. You can practically put them in your front pockets. They're really accurate, and I guarantee you that if you are popping rounds at somebody, they will duck. You can stop somebody from coming through the door. It ain't a great rifle for stopping a big dude. It ain't very powerful and ain't going to knock nobody down, but you start poking holes in people and they will stop. Yeah. Yeah, shotguns are good, and I like shotguns especially for like urban areas, small, tight quarters, because like with the shotgun, like, if you have some high power pistol or rifle or something, you can like, it'll go through walls, like, boom, 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 right through neighbors' walls, through cars, right on, past that into the, into wherever it's going. And it's like, that can be a scary kind of situation. With most of the time with the shotgun, it'll stay kind of like, unless you got slugs or something, but for the most part, it's not going to really go past the walls, right? It might get past the wall, but it won't have much, much impact after that. And so it's awesome effectiveness. It really is super easy to use. They're like, you kind of point and click weapon, it's just like, they're really for like home defense. There's really no better one to have. But when it comes to survival, you could use it in a survival, but rounds are really big and they're really heavy, and you're not going to be able to carry 1,000 of them with you. I mean, maybe you could, but it's going to be really, really difficult. And so in that sense, for home defense, perfect, but survival, I'd still go back down to the 1022. Yeah. Lightweight, accurate, it's perfect. Yeah. All right. AR-15 night vision goggles, hunting at night not during the day. Yeah. And see, all those other rifles, see, I thought about those too. And ultimately, all the rest of the stuff, I mean, would serve serious purpose. It would work for the defense side of things. It would work for the hunting side of things. It would work for all these things. But to have one weapon, just take one with you, what is it going to be? Is it going to be one where you can only pack a few hundred rounds? Or one that is able to carry thousands of rounds? Is it one that is going to be limited on how far it could really shoot as far as accuracy goes? Or are you going to have one that, as long as you can see it, you can hit it? Right? This is like, it's really comes down to, what it is that you anticipate on doing with that. And for me, like, I'm not into the whole fighting idea. And that's where a lot of people move the idea to. It's just like, no, I need something to fight with. And to me, I'm not into the fighting idea. That's not what I'm going to do. Right now, if I need to fight, I will. And, I mean, it's probably not going to be very much fun for anybody out there, just considering, I mean, I'm not trying to brag it up or anything, like how awesome I am at shooting, but I'm pretty good with the rifle, right? Like, if you open sights, and I like short vision, like all this stuff is blurry, but out there in the distance, like I can see very clearly out there. And so it's like, if I can see it, I can hit it. I have very little doubt in my mind, and so, like, I don't need a whole fancy anything. I just need something that I can pack a lot of rounds and go for it with. Um, Owns a 45. He says that's all you need. No, that's not true. 45 is great for, for self-defense, for your sidearm, for protection, for you're protecting yourself. Like, that's great. 45 sidearm, and those are awesome. But if you're looking for something that's going to be a utility for many purposes, a 45 isn't going to be the one. Right? Can you use it for other purposes? Sure, right? You can shoot a deer with it or whatever, but what is it that you're going to be more useful? A pistol or a rifle if you're in a survival situation? Right? Most likely a rifle is going to be more useful. I'm going to have to weather. Oh, I'm going to have whatever I have. Persistence is key. I love guns. Yeah, guns are okay. I never, I That's what's funny. I never really got like infatuated with guns, or I mean, I had like at one time I had a small collection of them, but for the most part, I never really got into guns like, like, oh man, I really like guns, It's just like, hey, guns are fun. They're, shooting, hunting, doing stuff like that, but to me, it's not any different than, a musical instrument or something else out there. I never really got into like, the idea that, you know, I don't know, like all the fancy guns and, the exotic stuff and all that. It was just like, oh, whatever. I mean, it'd be fun to go out shooting a bunch of different types of guns, and to shoot some really high powered rifles that I've never shot before. That would be a lot of fun, see how far I can shoot some long distance targets. That to me would be a hell of a lot of fun, especially with somebody who really knew what they were doing. Like, you're taking 1,000-yard shots or something like that. Like that would be a lot of fun for me, but I don't really think about it in a way that like I'm fascinated by the idea of it or anything. I'd be like, well, that would be a fun afternoon. Okay, on to other things. All right, let's talk about economics. It's King Dollar going to destroy everything? It's still high with the high expectations. Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, the dollar will destroy the world at some point. Right? It'll be King Dollar coming in, destroying the world, and everybody's going to be just absolutely blown away by how that actually looks. And how long of an event that actually is, I don't know. And how far out, couldn't tell you. But when dollar denominated debt starts to come due and people are getting out of the dollar and the dollar is not being printed to meet the demand for liquidity out there, then you're going to see the dollar strengthen to levels unlike anything anybody had ever seen before. And it will absolutely destroy the world. And you have to think about it. This is the problem of the Federal Reserve right now, is trying to figure out a way that they can inject more money into the system, expand the liquidity out there without sending the United States on an unsustainable debt path. This is going to put them in another desperate situation. I am sure of it. The Federal Reserve at some point will be buying the debt of a foreign nation. I am almost guaranteeing that. And I don't know when that's going to happen or what it's going to look like, but they've already kind of set the motion into place, or set it into motion already, with Jerome Powell even saying it again, like reiterated it at that Q&A session at Harvard. All right, how many people were lit up? It was just like, did you hear what he said? That the United States is on an unsustainable debt path. And I'm like, he's been saying that for like 6-7 years now, right? Ever since he became chairman of the Fed. That is not something that is new to the Federal Reserve's observations. This is something that they've talked about quite extensively for a very long time. And to know that the Federal Reserve has already communicated that they have the legal authority to buy a foreign nation's debt, like, to me, it's just like, that's the path that they're going to go down. How do they get more liquidity in the system? Don't buy the U.S. government debt. Buy the debt of a foreign nation, put it on the books, and then send out the liquidity. I am only assuming that that is going to be very difficult to try and keep track of if it isn't in a central bank digital currency or tokenization or something like that. It is at that point that I feel that it would be like full on. The Fed will be like, great, here we go. We got tokenizations, we got central bank digital currencies, get cash out of the system or not. It doesn't really matter. You can just, charge a fee for the cash, and it'll essentially, people make it a nuisance and people will abandon it anyway. So for me, that's the direction in which that they are going to go. They're like, the dollar failure, although it's going to happen at some point in the future, like it's just an inevitability. The games that they can play with, and it's not even games, it's just like the tools that they develop, is what I should say, is really something that they have like worked on for 10, 20 years, probably better than that, to come up with not only the ability to then go into negative interest rates, but then carry on this fiat system. Like, that's the whole point of it. And so when people say, man, once they get to the lower bound of zero, that's it, they're done. Well, that wasn't true. Once they go negative, they're done. I doubt that's true either. Once the cash is out of the system, they're done. No, I don't think so, right? Tokenization, central bank digital currencies, cashless society, negative interest rates, it's all in the cards. It's all it's all being baked into the cake at the point. So the idea of like how long before the dollar actually fails, and it'd be like, I'm way the hell out there somewhere, but it's going to happen. It's just like, but to prepare and invest for that idea today, you sit around waiting for failure, like invest into failure, I guess. I don't know. That doesn't work. All right. I think what we are looking at is a transition into what I view as the data dollar. What's the data dollar? I believe the dollar is expanding. Stable coins will do this with tokenization. The propaganda is that BRICS is taking over. I don't know. Remember, everybody said that they were going to fail too when the BRICS, the Brexit thing. Everybody lit up about that. Man, they were so sure that the whole thing was just going to completely collapse. Euro is going to collapse. All these things are going to collapse, and it was all going to be over soon. And here it is years later. Nobody's really talking about that anymore. I'm sure there's still issues, but nobody talks about it. Not like they did. Let's see here. They'll get the digital dollar going in the next crisis. Then they can start with negative interest rates. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm assuming at some point, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to be in the next crisis or what that next crisis is going to be. As of right now, I think the next crisis is going to come when inflation fails, when inflation falls away, right? Like as they can no longer keep the, one series after another of inflationary pressures, then what will happen is it starts to collapse at that point. Now, if they are far enough into it, into creating or having the stablecoin regulations or whatever it is going, making sure that, everything is cool with that part of it, then I would assume, yes, that negative interest rates would be shortly to follow after that. If the Federal Reserve was to go to zero, if the inflationary pressures were to fade away and all that other stuff. But again, like, I don't know what it is that's coming next, but I'm almost assuming at some point we're going to have a new credible threat to keep pushing the inflation expectations. I doubt they're really going to be using, like right now, they can use the Fed independence, but it really seems like the Fed independence thing is really just set up to use like whether or not Warsh is going to be like confirmed or not. And then if he's not, then the chairman Powell can hold his position even after his expiration of his term until the new chairman is voted in. So even if he was like, hey, your term's expired and all that, you're no longer chairman of the Fed, until the Senate actually, confirms the new chairman, he stays in that position even after the expiration of his term. So talk about reestablishing the Fed's like independence. Wouldn't that be a way to do it? Say, oh yeah, by the way, Jerome Powell is going to stick in his position here to prove how independent the Federal Reserve is, knowing that Donald Trump wanted him out, tried to get him fired, all this other stuff, and now he's sticking in farther and longer than what he even was scheduled to. Talk about like establishing Fed independence. They'd be like, yeah, President, you don't get anything you want from us. In fact, Jerome Powell stuck it out even longer than his term because of you. Yeah. All right. Okay. Nathan and Deplorable. There are the two going at it. Okay. Well, let's cruise back down here. It can be all of the above: debt, petro, and allowing the dollar creation via stablecoins. I think the high expectations of the inflation are already falling. The Genius Bill sets stablecoins. No, I agree. Like, I agree that a lot of the inflation expectation has fallen out, but you really have to think how much has been tried to be pushed in, especially since the Iranian conflict, started to really push the idea that energy costs and all this other stuff. The idea of inflation expectation is quite elevated. Now, like the real inflation, what the true inflation, I don't know what that is. But the inflationary scenario that we are faced with here within the economy right now is really not that bad. Like, I mean, it's like Fed's like, man, we're just stuck here, just stuck just above our 2% target. And I'm like, barely. Like, you're barely above 2%. Most central banks around the world, they target 2% average, meaning that they need to be somewhere between 1% and 3% inflation. And if they're between 1 and 3, that's generally a good position. And that's the way most central banks around the world operate. And even in the United States, the 2% target was completely arbitrary. It was invented from New Zealand, some New Zealand central banker out there who just thought that, man, 2% seems to be about right for an inflationary scenario for the economy, but never really is there any kind of like, it's just completely arbitrary. There's like the 2% was just kind of an invented number, right? And so the idea behind a 2% target and how the Fed is super committed to this 2% is just like, it's completely BS. It's just made up. It's their own head, right? Like, they've never, ever, 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 ever been at 2% in the history of the Federal Reserve. Like, they passed by it on one way or the other, but never have they been able to maintain a 2% target. Why anybody would think that they can do it going into the future is beyond me. Like, I don't know why people would think that. Like even all the mainstream media and the Federal Reserve itself and all these people talk about how the Federal Reserve is trying to get to the 2% target and then they'll have achieved their goal. And I'm thinking, no, you won't. You never have in the past. Never once. Why in the world would anybody believe that you're going to do it into the future? That does not make any sense to me. Yet everybody does, and it totally works with the credible threat of it because it maintains that long-term inflation expectation at 2%, which is exactly what the Federal Reserve is looking for. Long-term inflation expectations locked in at 2% elevate the current inflationary scenario. And it's very difficult. They even talked about how this is a very difficult thing to do and that they had planned to do this a long time ago and say, that's going to be really hard to maintain a locked in 2% long-term inflation goal while elevating the current inflationary scenario, right? Without losing that long-term locked in inflation expectation. But they did it. They totally got it. Everybody knows that they're going for 2%. Except for the Fed and me. We already read that. All right. Nathan, and what people don't understand is that every time the president, quote, jokes about something, it's not a joke, it's a threat, and most of the time it comes true. Actually, most of the time it doesn't, because if it came true most of the time, they wouldn't have an acronym called taco trade, right? Like taco trade stands for Trump always chickens out. They wouldn't, like, I didn't invent that. I invented the credible threat theory saying that he was going to use his words more than his actions. And I said that before he was even president because I've been trying to spread this credible threat theory for 4 or 5 years now. And so to think that the president always like tells the truth and he is always committed to that outcome, then they wouldn't have invented something called the taco trade, right? They wouldn't have even had that acronym to use. And considering that I had developed the credible threat theory, which is essentially saying that they're going to use their words more than their actions, and the taco trade is saying that they're going to use their words more than their actions, I wonder what's going on here, And it was just like, so who's more accurate on that? I don't know. Maybe you weren't talking about Donald Trump. Maybe you were talking about a different president. I don't know. That's exactly what I expect Trump to do. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I can't trust him enough to believe anything that he's going to do. Right? I really don't. I don't believe a single thing that anything that he is ever saying. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he blows things up. But then again, as an economist, I understand that war is part of this. I don't like it, but it ain't up for me to like. Right? And I'm not going to be here and be all emotional about the whole idea saying, oh man, they shouldn't be doing all this other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't like, I'm not into fighting and all that other stuff. I can't control this. I can't stop it. Right? But I can recognize that war, death, famine, destruction, profit, awesomeness, all this stuff is part of the economy. And to think that it shouldn't exist, well, it does, and it's going to, and it's going to happen more in the future too. All right. Cantillon said there would be wars. He did. Absolutely, he did. It's like you can't stop it. It's because once the new money turns off, they take you to war. And if they don't take you to war, the new money turns off. So what's happening at the end of the cycle? A lot of freaking war, right? Because as the system comes to an end and they need to get the new money in, they have to take you to war, right? Like they don't have to. That's what happens. Like you think about it, every conquering nation out there had to expand their conquering exploiting of other countries by taking their money and sending it back home. That was essentially what they were doing, is going out there in search of new money. And once you get to the point where you can't get the new money in, the whole thing starts to collapse. And so at the end of the cycle, they're going to war to try and get the new money. And then once it collapses, they take you to war because you ain't got no new money. All right. Can I make a tower? Tower time. The war is desperation to maintain the quality of life. It really is. The war is a desperation to maintain the quality of life. You're absolutely right about that. Get the Cantillon essay and follow along. Yes, thank you, Deja. Yeah. I should start selling those Cantillons. There's a link down in the description. Well, not right now, but typically there's an Amazon affiliate link. But, I'm thinking I'd just sell those things personally to people. Yeah. People should just call me up and write, I'll sign it with their name or something in it, and they can pay me money for it. There's the link. Thank you so much, All Nighter. I appreciate it. There's the link right there for the Cantillon essay. And I encourage everybody to go check it out. It's a really, especially chapters 6, 7, and 8, part 2, chapters 6, 7, and 8. It's a must read. But you can get that essay for free off the Mises Institute. All right. If all of this is true, then we actually do physically live in hell. Yeah, I guess if that's the meaning that you've given behind it. But for me, I'm like, I actually enjoy my experience. It wasn't always that great, and there was times where it's a lot. It was really like not great at all, and then there was sometimes that it was even better than this. But then again, I think to myself, all good things come to an end, right? Like I don't expect like the best experience I ever had to be the best experience for the rest of my life. Right? Like, you get something that's awesome and then you remember that awesomeness. Like things change, it's always always on the move. All right. I read the Cantillon essay on my channel, Key Philosophies. Credit to you, bro. Well, thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. And I'm glad everybody is reading that essay. I think the more of us who understand what's written in that essay, the less likely we are going to have an economy that looks like this. People would just naturally be making the right decisions, understanding the Cantillon effect and how it plays out. Not everybody would, but generally speaking, as the population goes, if people understood deep down inside that they have to be productive, saving from the get-go, they wouldn't even vote in ways that doesn't allow that sort of environment to exist. But they vote in ways that say that the government should just. And in the moment that you do that, whether you're rich or poor, the moment you say the government should just, the problems start to create. Right? And the problem is, Simon, I've read the Cantillon essay. I've read the Cantillon essay. I guess you probably speak in this. Okay. Cantillon essay, and I've tried to tell my friends about it, and they think I'm crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. I probably am. No, you're not, Nathan. You got to think. We already learned this from Justin. Justin, it was very insistent that we learn about the allegory of the cave, right? And this is the problem, is that once you have become insightful onto something, you go back into telling your friends about it, and it seems very difficult for them to understand what it is that you have learned, right? They already have their belief system set up. See, you should go and look at it. It's really good. I'm so glad that Justin actually insisted that I watch this or read that story or, watch the YouTube story on it. But you should go check it out. Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And man, it's really good because the story behind it is like, here you got these guys. Right? I love the story. I'll just tell it to you guys, and then I'm going to go back inside and go get something to eat. But I love this story of the cave, right? Because what happens here is that the idea behind the story is that there's a bunch of people who are prisoners in a cave, right? And so they've been in this cave their entire life. They've never seen anything else except for the images on the wall, which is a shadow being casted by a fire, and then things passing by the fire that then cast the shadow on the wall. Now they don't get to see the actual items that are passing by in front of the fire that cast this shadow. All they get to see is the shadows, they hear the noises. So they start to form these opinions on what it is that they are looking at there. They have these deep discussions, they come up with these philosophical debates, and they finally come up with the decisions, and or the person who, or the group of people who seemingly know the most about it, they're the ones who then are essentially the understanders of this, people who understand the images, right? So they're committed to that. They look at it, they see it, they know it. Now, one of the people gets to the cave. He goes outside, and once he gets outside, he realizes, man, everything that he's been looking at on the wall has been a lie, man. His eyes were like burning from the sun, but as they started to adjust to the light, he's starting to recognize birds, and he's starting to recognize the trees, and he's recognizing all these images and stuff that were passing by in front of the wall, and thinking, man, this is not what it is that those people thought. These things are for real, and I gotta tell him, man. And so he goes back into the cave to tell these people, but when he gets back into the cave, he can't see because his eyes have adjusted to the light, and it's very dark, and so he's trying to get his way through there, and he's stumbling, and he's disoriented. And by the time he gets to the people and he starts to explain what it is that he's finding outside, he say, man, don't you realize we already figured this stuff out? What it is that you're like, look at you, you don't see, you can't see, you're stumbling around, you don't make any sense. We've already figured this stuff out. Who are you? You're nuts, man. Right? And that's the unfortunateness when it comes to essentially discovering, or I don't want to call myself enlightened, but being enlightened to the idea of what it is that's happening out there. When you start to see it beyond the shadows on the wall and you start looking at it for the reality of the light that is casting down, you start to see it in such a fashion that when you go back to tell your friends about it, they call you crazy. They say, man, dude, look at you. You're stumbling around. You can't say it right. You're not figuring it out. We already got this stuff figured out. Here, let me show you. Let's turn on let's turn on the CNN or turn on Fox or something. These guys, they'll tell you. Hey, Millennial Mike, man. Thank you so much for being here. I thought of a question this week I wanted to ask you. Right on. We're never going back to a gold standard, but could we ever go to a silver standard? No, Millennial Mike, we can't. And thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate the support for the channel. It's a really good question as far as the availability of gold as opposed to silver or all that other stuff. And the question really comes down to understanding the underlying economic forces that are playing out. If you are on any kind of fixed currency, right? So like gold or silver or Bitcoin, it doesn't really matter. If there is a fixed currency that you are working with, then the problems are always going to end up being the same. And that is the Cantillon effect is going to kick in, right? We have a high standard of living. With that high standard of living, we import stuff, right? So if you import stuff, you export what? The money, right? So this is the situation that the United States sits in, is that we are a debtor consumer nation. So if we were to go to a silver standard or, slip into a silver standard and tried to maintain our standard of living, what would happen is we would import that stuff and export our silver until we were completely broken, miserable, and then in poverty. So being on a silver standard when you are running trade deficits is a very damaging thing to go towards. It's just not going to work, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There's some people who are going to be able to hold on to it in the nation and be like really awesome and profitable from that. But for the generally speaking population, they're going to end up suffering the consequences as all the money gets exported until it's gone. And then we fall into poverty and misery. So in that case, okay, so you end the trade deficits, which sounds great, but they don't end, right? And there's another problem that comes with it, because you would have to end the trade deficits before you switch over to the silver, right? So that you don't have this problem with the Cantillon effect. So let's play that one out a little bit. So here, for whatever reasons, we were able to bring manufacturing back, cut back on the foreign imports coming in, and we have this trade balance, literally a trade balance. It's perfect, right? We're not exporting more than we're importing. It's absolutely perfect. In this sense, you could possibly do a silver standard, right? Because you're equally trading, so long as that balance of trade remained in equilibrium, right? Now, the problem that we're going to face is that going into a gold, or going into this position where you are, trying to find that balance of trade that is happening, the problem you're going to face is that you have to get there first before you can switch. On the way there, Triffin's dilemma is going to start kicking in, right? So now Triffin's dilemma is something that is really interesting. And the idea is that if you do not export the dollars out of the nation, the dollar will start to strengthen. If it strengthens, our domestic exports that we send out to foreign nations becomes more expensive, and we lose that manufacturing exporting market, right? Or exporting our manufacturing products. Because again, the dollar is strengthening on the idea of Triffin's dilemma here, where if you are importing stuff, you're exporting dollars. But if you don't export the dollars because we have a balance of trade and the demand for dollars is elevated on the account of all the dollar denominated debt that exists out there, the dollar starts to strengthen. And again, it starts to slow our economy down. Right? So this is a very big problem for the United States in the sense that we are a consumer debtor nation. If you are a consumer debtor nation, the last thing you want is a fixed currency. If we were a producing saving nation, that's absolutely the place we want to be. We definitely want to be on gold. We definitely want to be on silver. We definitely want to be on Bitcoin if we are a producing saving nation, because then we can produce stuff, send that stuff out to the world, and the world would send us their gold and silver and Bitcoin. That would work out great. Then we can elevate our standard of living. We can have an awesome economy and all that from it. But to try and transition into it is going to take a very big depression within the people themselves. It would have to, be poverty stricken in order to then have the ability to compete with the other nations on there on a balance of trade. That's going to be very difficult. And then you have to get all the dollar denominated debt to alleviate all the dollar denominated debt of the world. And that ain't gonna happen. That's because more dollar denominated debt gets created every single day. It's not going the other way, it's going deeper, right? So at some point there will be a crashing of it, and then we may be forced into a silver or gold standard or Bitcoin standard. But being forced into it as opposed to strategically being able to get yourself there are going to be two completely different things. And the strategically get yourself there, I just don't think is even possible, right? But the inevitable collapse is. Did I get all that out? Does all that make sense? Like, ultimately, if we were a producing saving nation, then we would be good, right? But because we're a debtor consumer nation, then the last thing you want to be on is a fixed currency. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, to say would it be a better? Well, sure, you'd have limited government, you would have reasonable business practices, you would have it would be a better system in a lot of ways. Like if you were to ask me personally which one I would prefer, well, I would prefer that there would be a fixed currency system, especially that of gold and silver or Bitcoin or something of this nature. But I understand how I would conduct myself inside of that, knowing that most people wouldn't understand how to handle themselves in that situation. I can't see it just, trying to create that. And it isn't really up to me to decide what it should be. It's just up to us to figure out what it is that's going on. And again, I would much rather see the system that we have now continue to operate, so at least the people who are old or Social Security recipients or something of that nature, they don't starve and end up on the streets. I don't like the idea of what we have, because eventually that is going to happen, but I don't want to force the situation. I figured I can learn how to deal with this. I can learn how to deal and operate within this economy. It's not easy. I had to learn it. I couldn't take the lessons of my parents or something like that. I had to figure it all out on my own, just like everybody else is figuring it out on their own as well. But ultimately, I would much rather figure it out in the evil I know than the evil I don't, right? And the evil I don't know, I think I could actually do pretty well in that one too. So, I mean, I'm good with it either way, but for the majority of the people out there, I think it would be a pretty devastating situation for them to go through. I don't know. Does all that make sense, Mike? Did I ramble on too much? I made it too boring, probably. Okay. Roy, please be cohesive with the chat. Simon, I am insisting upon you watching the YouTube video called The History of the Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind. No, thanks. All right. Jeff, exactly. Others will follow up. If it was a documentary talking about the monetary policy, then I probably would. But I don't need to hear more stuff from the creature from Jekyll Island. I've already been down that road. I already know that. I already understand all that stuff that's happening. I understand the manipulation tactics. I understand how it is they make the rich richer. I understand how it is they get the banks to get to the stock market to make the rich richer. I understand all that stuff. I don't need to be told anymore about how that works. All right? Like, I could sit here and tell you some really devastating stuff when it comes to conspiracy theories and how it is that this country really conducts itself, and I don't like thinking about it, and I'm not going to go down that road. All right. Let's face it, we have is so much better than if we were to try and do this on our own. It would be short and brutal or brutish. Jeff, that's how the world is destined to play, in my humble opinion. Deja, I'm surprised we let them have it. France is smart for being the first ones to get their gold back off of us. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think about the people themselves should be making the decision to get back on the gold standard. Right? Like, if every single person took it upon themselves to position themselves in the gold and silver, like literally every single person, you know, has some in their existence because that's how important it is to them. If you were to be able to put yourself in a position that could exit yourself from that third party risk, or at least have the belief that you could, do you know how different this economy would look? How different the government would look? I mean, it would be so much different. People would have, how do I put this? People would not only trust them less, but then hold them accountable more. Especially if they said, you know what? We're going to just make you irrelevant. Now, if everybody was sitting in gold and silver and they had that sort of attitude, that we will literally make you irrelevant if you do not hold the line, right? The people don't do that. They're not even close to doing that. When I hear like, we should go back on a silver or gold or Bitcoin or something like that, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's a great idea. The only problem is that literally the people themselves have no idea on what that means, nor do they do it. Because if they did, we would literally go back to a gold and silver standard. We can make our government irrelevant. All right. And now I don't know how many people actually believe that. Most people would shake their head and say, "Man, you're just so delusionally and that's so wrong." But it's not. It's very, very real and is very, very accurate. And the problem that most people end up facing is that they won't be able to see it because they don't really understand the Constitution within itself. Right? Like, if you understood the Constitution from the get-go, then you wouldn't have had an economy that was even built to this level. It wouldn't have even existed like this. A constitutional republic? No, not like this. This isn't how they end up. So when people say like, oh man, you got to vote and vote for the right person and stuff like that. And I'm like, vote for who? Like, these people don't have the Constitution in mind. They're not staying within the confines of the Constitution. They have no expectations of anything about maintaining my personal freedoms and rights. Like, there is literally nothing within it that says, man, you should vote for these people. Nothing. Not a single thing. Right? And yet, here it is. You have the ability to own this government. Like, of the people, by the people, for the people. That is still very much legit. But yet, nobody sees it that way. And everybody participates in the debt finance system when they could easily exit out of it. You could just get some gold, silver, cut your, payments down to absolute as low, like money in the bank, no stocks, no bonds, none of that stuff. All right. You would have this government held so accountable under the people, just so worried that they would actually be doing it for the people again. But nobody does it that way. I'm going to go. What time is it? Oh, hour and 48 minutes into it. Okay, I'll give it another 12 minutes and then I'm going to go. You need a lot more than shelter and food, guys. You need med care, to clean water to drink, transportation, protection from thugs and government. Yeah, there's a lot that need, and that's why I don't even, It's fundamentally political, but so transferable for economics as well. Yeah, I totally get that's talking about the allegory of the cave. Uh, I thought Simon didn't want to play this. What I'm moving on. Okay. Nathan, I'm sorry, not truce. Actually, the only thing that a human or any other mammal needs is food and water and shelter to exist. If you were alone on an island, that's what you need. Well, yeah, I mean, if you're alone on an island, I guess, but if I was alone on an island, I don't know if that is exactly the existence that I would want to be in, right? So when people say, I don't want this as existence, what are you going to live on a desert island? Or, it's like, man, none of that stuff makes sense to me. Like, when will you find yourself on a desert island? Is that a real thing? I'm looking at what it is that I need to do to position myself to deal with the issues that I am finding. Right? Knowing that there was going to be a push for inflation and inflation expectations. Knowing that for 6 years now. I mean, reading this speech from August of 2020, from August 27th of 2020, right? And in that speech, he pretty much lays it out. These next few years are going to be bad. Nobody heard it. He delivered the speech. He talked about it out there in the media, said it outright. People heard it and then forgot and then never brought it up again and then say, hey, man, you remember when you said this and now we have that outcome? Do you want to explain that a little bit better to us again? No? Okay. Well, maybe we'll go and watch UE instead, right? Because they're not talking about it. They're not going to bring it up again. They said, hey, man, we were in a desperate situation to find ourselves at an inflationary pressure that is too low rather than too high. We need high inflation. We need it really bad. Now they got it. They're not coming to the people and saying, hey, good job, man. Great expectations, great elevated expectations. You totally got us in a position in which that the neutral interest rate is rising and it's making the economy less restricted. Great, good job. All right? They don't talk like that. They ain't going to. If you are on a desert island, you need food, water, shelter, and good mate and the Cantillon essay. Well, yeah, well, at least one of those things. All right. Well, Simon, actually, in the Dark Ages, 50% of Europe died from plague, and so many people found themselves alone. Yeah, I know. Well, you're finding right now, Japan has many young people who are alone because their parents only had one kid, them, and then their parents died, and now they're the only ones left. Right? And that's going to happen in this nation too. So it's like, being left alone. It's not just because of the plague. It's because of family formations disintegrating. You know, I think about it. I feel like, you know, I worry for what the future generations are really going to look like. The disconnect between each other, it's just unreal. There was a time when, everybody like they had to like get together, right? They had to get together, and that was the only interaction was by getting together. And now people interact through cell phones and devices and stuff like that, and it's completely like fading away from the idea of like, what is it, the unity, the village kind of feeling. What happens when you run into hard times? Like, everybody's going to face something at some point in their life. If you don't have family, what do you have? Yeah, nothing. That's what they're facing in Japan. All these people who are on this government assistance stuff because they literally just don't have any parents to help them out. And that's like, I know for me, like even when I was in my 30s, and I know for a lot of people that I talk to, they really needed the most help when they were in their 30s. Now, when you're a kid and you're 20, you can kind of screw up a lot and, crashing out wherever, sleeping in your car, sleeping at friends' houses or something. But you get into 30 and you start really stumbling and messing up. Man, if you don't get your stuff together around there, you're going to really be down, right? It's going to be very hard to get back from that. And I know a lot of people who said, man, I was in my 30s when I really screwed it up the most. And if it wasn't for my parents, man, I don't know what it is that I would have done. Well, I think about what if you didn't have any parents around? Well, and you'd be done. right? Unless you were able to figure it out, but it's not easy out there, especially if you were raised in a, low income family and then don't have any kind of support or any kind of family out there. Like, it's a difficult road to go down. And, everybody has to, do it for themselves. They have to figure it out for themselves. But, being a victim of your circumstance doesn't, it's not easy just to go and figure out what it is you need to do. You don't even know that there's something different to do. Like, it would be one thing to say, like, man, I want to do that. But if you didn't even know that existed, how would you do it? Divide and conquer, the Fed strategy. What? To do what? I don't understand that one. Divide and conquer what? That's why I had kids, because I knew I would run into more hard times. Well, and even on that sense of it, like, the last thing I want to do is be a burden on my kids, when I get older. But those people who had lots of kids in their life, they can take care of them. They can, you know, between the 6 kids, it's just like, hey, a couple of them are going to, take care of the parents as they get older. And that's generally speaking kind of what happens in those bigger families. It's not like, it's not like a burden on it. It's just the way it goes. But if you don't have any family and, it's very difficult, that's what's happening here. It's like that small family formation. You only have one kid. Kid's going to watch you die. I mean, it's just like, it's like nobody there to share, like to be with or have family or sisters or brothers or anything like that. This is where we're going towards, right? This is the type of society that's going to exist here in a couple of generations, if not just one from now. All right, Nathan, now you're making me feel guilty. Elderly neighbors went into a retirement home and I promised I would visit them, and I've only done it once so far. Yeah. Well, a lot of times we say things that, make us and the other people feel good, but sometimes you just have to do things. You don't say it, you just do it. In fact, I'm getting to the point that I don't want to tell anybody what I'm doing anymore. Right? Like, there's plenty of stuff that I do out there, but it's just like, it's almost getting to the point now that I don't want to tell people about what I'm doing. Right? They can recognize it if I'm doing, like, what I'm doing at the time. If they happen to, they see what I've accomplished in the past and they ask me how I've done it, that's cool. But I'm not going to tell people what I'm doing anymore. Right? And ultimately, it's because they start setting you up for failure, not on purpose, but just in the general being. Most people don't want to see you succeed, and they'll say stuff in a way as if it's protecting you, kind of thing. Like, oh, we just don't want to see you get hurt or take a chance or whatever. None of that stuff, like, none of that matters, right? So there's no point in them even knowing or even hearing about it or even getting their opinion about it unless you really, like, trust their opinion you want it. Like, you're seeking out some advice or something. But other than that, it ain't none of their business. So just stop telling people what you're doing. None of my parents had to go to a nursing home. Well, that's cool. All right, even your own mother tells you you won't succeed. Well, mine mother didn't, but yeah, I mean, I've heard that happen out there, Like, here's one. When the channel was really taking off and I was doing pretty well and I was thinking, man, should I really go and pursue some other things in my life, or should I stick it out at this day job? And what's funny about it is that so many people that come to me, I was like, don't give up your day job, don't give up your day job. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking back on it and I was like, man, I wish I would have given up my day job. Right? Because I would have went off and pursued something else in my life that probably would have been so much more grand. And I can always go back to a day job. But I stuck it out at that day job just merely because I kind of like the day job. And I like where I'm living. And I liked what I was doing. And I like everything that was happening. And I didn't have any disappointments. And until I got to the point where I says, oh, this day job just doesn't really suit it for me anymore, I need to go, then I would have let it go. But I never got to that point. Like I just never, it was just like everything was good. So it was just like, okay, just keep pouring, just keep doing it, you know? And so I never really thought about it in that fashion. But really, when I look back on it, all those people who said, don't give up your day job, don't give up your day job, I wish I hadn't listened to them, you know? Because now I go back and I think about it, it was just like, did that prevent me from actually going and pursuing some of those other things? Because they heard it and they got in my head or whatever. So, you know what? No more. I don't, like, they can tell me, try and give me advice on whatever. It's just like, I ain't listening anymore, right? I ain't telling people what I'm going to do. All right. The reason you have friends in your life is because you feel either that you are equal or beneath them. The minute you exceed them, jealousy and insecurity takes hold. Nathan, I don't want to agree with that, but I kind of agree with that. You know, I really do. I don't think necessarily like maybe it is jealousy. I don't know. I don't know what it is that's really out there within people. But there are some people who do feel that way. Other people I know, they're very encouraging. They're like, dude, kick it, man. Go out there. I like every one of your videos, man. Just keep doing it, man. You're awesome. All right. And those are people that I know. And when I think about that, it was just like, I try to be that way with other people. You know, when they're like, "Oh man, I'm going to try and get a business off the ground," I'm like, man, go for it, dude. Just kick it, man. You know, don't worry about the stresses of it, man. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, but man, go for it. I always encourage them. You know, and anything they do, anytime anybody's ever working on anything, I always try to give them the most encouragement. Like they give them like as much support and awesomeness when it comes to it. You know, I might like I love picking on people and roasting and doing all that other stuff, but I only pick on people I like, and I never do it with their work. I never like, make them feel bad about their work or anything. I always make them feel really good, you know? And by doing that, you only get like more support and, more awesomeness that comes from it. But I've worked with, I work now with plenty of people who do it, but I've worked with plenty of people in the past, and it's a very common thing that you'll hear people say, oh man, they suck at what they do. Look at this horribleness, and they suck, or, and they just go on and just bash it. And I'm thinking, that's not going to get them to do any better, right? When they feel good about the work, then they want to do the work. But if they feel like they're being, like they're not being appreciated for what they do, then they won't do a good job. That's all there is to it. And it's easy to put that into them to saying you suck at what you do. The moment you do it, they don't feel the appreciation for it, and then their work quality diminishes. Well, if you're a foreman of a job like I've been, the last thing you want is for the damn work to diminish. You want it to increase. You want even more done. So all I did was just tell people how awesome they were at what they did. And they would get out there and they would prove how awesome they were. And it was just like, look how awesome we did. Yeah, it was just like, that's the way it works. And all right, studies have shown that people would rather take a pay decrease as long as everyone around them makes less money than they are. Then they increase their income, but only people make more money. They would take a pay cut. In order to be like, I don't even know how much the other people around me make. I never ask. I've never, ever, ever asked how much anybody else makes around me. I just don't care. It's not my business what they make. I negotiated my wage, and that's what I get. That's what I get. I mean, if I wanted more money, I should have negotiated better. So I don't ask people how much they make, and I don't tell people how much I make. I don't like, yeah, it's none of their business, and I never bring it up, and I never ask, and I never tell. It's just like it's none of their. And I've been that way my entire life. It does not matter. It is not my business how much money you make. That is not my business. I'm not going to get involved in that. Right? Good for you, all day slayer. Then you're not one of those who I speak of. Okay. Oh, I gotta go here, guys. Studies have shown that people would rather. Oh, we already read that. All right. What do you think about major Gabe owners taking over the war in Iran? I don't. I don't think about that. No, Moses, people just don't know how to be real. There is a difference. What did Moses say? People are fake in the end. Yeah, I agree with that. People are fake, but I don't think they're fake on purpose. I think they're fake because they're trying to meet the expectations of other people. Like literally people are walking around having no idea on how it is that they should be conducting themselves because they're trying to meet the approval of other people. And that sucks. And that's really where the fakery comes in. They're trying to be nice, right? They're trying to be nice people, trying to get trying not to ripple any, send any waves out there, not ruffle any feathers, not do any of that stuff. And then they conduct themselves in ways that says, hey man, I'm going to meet everybody's approval. They do this so long that they don't even really know who they are, right, themselves, because they try to perform for whoever it is that's in the room, try and meet that expectation. So they don't even really know who they are anymore. And then most people don't even know who they are either because they're not acting like themselves. They're acting in accordance to whatever situation they happen to be in. And now it's understandable, like you're gonna act differently and behave differently when you're in front of your buddies than as opposed to when you're in front of your mom, right? Like when you're in your mom, you turn up the politeness and you're a lot cooler and collected. When you're hanging out with your buddies, you might get a lot more joking and a lot louder and obnoxious in a lot of ways. And so to understand, like, you are still you, even if you are behaving differently because you're in the presence of your mom, right? That's like reasonable and understandable. But to think, okay, who do I have to be to meet these people's approval? That is where most people are. And they end up really having a very frustrating time, not only interacting with people, but then having people interacting with them in the way that nobody knows who each other is, right? And that's unfortunate because the people who do figure that out, they really end up being on their own. And then they don't like hanging out or being around people who are fake. And the people who are fake don't get this because they're not understanding how it is that they're acting is really being noticed by these other people who are not doing that. They don't perform, they don't dance, they don't do anything to try and meet other people's approval. And then when they encounter somebody who does that, it annoys the piss out of them and they don't want to deal with it and they don't talk to those people and they don't hang out with them. And a lot of times they even come off as rude or arrogant or mean, right? But that's not it. They're just tired of dealing with people who are not conducting themselves like themselves, but instead conducting themselves to meet the approval of other people. And when that happens, the people who recognize that as being the case, they're like, yeah. It's not about right or wrong. No deplorable. You set your own value. They pay or they don't. Alrighty, guys, I gotta go. I was gonna end this like 7 minutes ago, but all right. Thanks for being here, everyone. Good night, all. Good night, Deja. I'm headed out myself. You darn right, Mr. Kemper. That's why I would never go back to the corporate America. Good riddance and to a diseased way of life. Man, deplorable. That's it's the best comment I've read so far. All right. Peacock gets a mate because of a very decorative plumes, as is most bird species and fish, etc. But human is born more or less the same. And so we've created these hierarchies. Why do you think the military attire is so prestigious? It's to show that there is a hierarchy between the military person and the average human. Huh? Thank you, Simon. Great info you have. Well, thank you so much. Me Mimosum. I love the handles. They're great. Thanks, Simon, and everyone. Thank you all night for being here, man. I really appreciate all the hard work you put into the channel and the dedication to it. You're here every time. I'm 10 minutes out. Got to stop for dinner. All right. All right. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for participating in the credible threat theory and the understanding of the credible threat theory, breaking down this idea and having the conversation about it. Again, the school community is about the best place you're going to go to. Not only will you get access to the credible threat theory course that I put together, an hour-long video course series. It's really easy to listen to. It really breaks down the idea of what it is that the Federal Reserve is doing with the inflation expectations. Very much helps to understanding our current situation. And then also the great conversations you're going to have over there. We're going to do a webinar this Saturday, 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Links down in the description. I hope to see a bunch of you there. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.